Hey everybody, it's Z, and this week we're talking about sexual identity. Most people, when first hearing about sexual identity, will equate it with sexual orientation. And the two are certainly related, but the two terms mean different things. So sexual orientation, we had a week on sexual orientation, and you can go look up those videos if you want. There are playlists for each week on our channel page, so you can look for that if you want a more detailed explanation of what sexual orientation is. Sexual identity includes sexual orientation, but that's not all it includes. It includes other sexual identities. So basically, sexual identity is how you identify yourself in regards to your sexuality or your sexual behavior or your sexual attractions. And yes, sexual behavior and sexual attractions are different things. So, for example, someone might say their sexual orientation is lesbian, but they are sometimes attracted to men, but either because they refuse to date men or because they just because they mostly like women, then that woman would identify as a lesbian. So their sexual orientation would be lesbian, but they might include lesbian who is sometimes attracted to men. That would be a sexual identity, because it's more information than just sexual orientation, but it just still falls under the umbrella of sexual identity. Now, there are sexual identities that have absolutely nothing to do with your orientation. An example of those is top and bottom. Bottom being someone who prefers to be penetrated, and top being someone who prefers to do the penetrating. So that's an example of a sexual identity that has nothing to do with your orientation. Even though some people think that, everyone is heterosexual and men always like penetrating and women always like being penetrated, which is not true even if you are heterosexual. Another category, a category of sexual identities, is any identity that falls under BDSM. BDSM stands for more things than the acronym has letters for, if that makes sense. So the BDSM. BD is bondage and discipline, and then you use the D again. DS is dominance, submission, and SM is sadism and masochism. So anyone who participates in such sexual practices may identify with an identity that explains that. For example, submissive. Someone who identifies as submissive has or is attracted to a relationship where they are submissive to their partner in a way that exceeds normal, standard depictions of sexuality, submission, or dominance. Basically, saying they submit to the dominant person is just a really simple way to explain it. And it doesn't mean that they do whatever the dominant person wants, even if they don't want it. That's an abusive relationship. But they do agree to submit a certain part, which may vary, of their will to the dominant, usually for a limited period of time. And so the dom or dominant is another sexual identity, and that's the counterpart to the submissive. Which isn't to say that two submissive people or two dominant people can't be in a relationship together. It just means that their sexual identities don't match up, but they can still be together. There isn't really a word for someone who likes bondage. And so as for sadism or masochism, usually sometimes sub and dom is used interchangeably with masochist and sadist, instead of, like, I guess sub and dom are easier to say than masochist. Like, masochist doesn't sound very sexy, it sounds like a disease. But there is in fact a difference. So a masochist is someone who derives pleasure from being physically hurt or emotionally hurt. And a sadist is someone who derives pleasure from inflicting pain. And I'm sure that you've heard the word sadist be used in a non-sexual way, and it's usually used to refer to horrible, cruel people who enjoy genuinely hurting others. But when it's used as a sexual identity in the BDSM community, it isn't someone who enjoys, like, hurting someone's, like, actual self. Like, they may just be, they may just like the reaction that they get from the masochist when they hurt them, usually physically. And basically what I'm trying to say is that if you're in a relationship which includes pain play of any type, it doesn't mean that the sadist is a bad person who wants to hurt the other person. Like, basically, even if you're the person is being physically hurt, it's like, it's what they want. Like, they are literally asking for it, not like, oh, they're asking for it, but like, they literally want that. And, as long as the person inflicting the pain is watching out for their physical health and their emotional health, there are routines for this. If you want to go look them up, or if you're interested, one of these things is called aftercare, which is like taking care of your partner's wounds and making sure they're emotionally okay after the play. Like, a sexual sadist basically is not cruel. An actual sadist is. Like, there's a difference. But yeah, people usually don't use the word sadist and masochist. They just use dom and sub interchangeably. But that's not really accurate, because you can have, like, dominance and submission without any either humiliation or physical pain play. And yeah, so even though people use the things interchangeably, they are technically separate sexual identities. That is, like, pretty much what I know about sexual identities outside of sexual orientation. And like I said, you can go see the sexual orientation video if you'd like. I'd like to add, since I did talk about BDSM, that there are lots of conflicting opinions on it. Some people think that it's like it's inherently abusive. I personally don't think that, but some people think that. Some people have really messed up ideas of what is BDSM. Like, there are a lot of things, like, for some people, they can't tell the difference between, like, BDSM and abuse. So if you want to know the difference, I will put links below explaining what is proper behavior in a relationship, even if it does include BDSM, and what is not proper relationship. So there is a difference between BDSM and abuse. And if you're interested in BDSM in any way, I would say please do your research, especially if it's going to involve like anything physical that could possibly injure you. There are methods to keep people from physical injury, and there are methods to keep people from emotional injury, because BDSM can be really, really emotional for both partners, or all partners. Okay, so that's basically what I know about sexual identity. I mostly talked about BDSM the whole time, but yeah, links below. If you want to talk about your sexual identity, please comment. Next week, I don't know what we're talking about next week. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye.